Hello there. Jim Blake's the name. And this is our house up near Cassidy's Hill. Looks restful from the front, but round the back it's sometimes a different story. Especially when you're in a hurry to get into town to do the weekend shopping and suddenly find you've got a flat.
Well, maybe I should have remembered it before. But just as I saw Jim disappearing down the drive, I suddenly realized that I hadn't asked him to get some wool that I needed to finish a jumper that I was knitting for young Jimmy. As I said, I should have remembered it before. Because restarting our car is a tricky business, to say the least. And on this particular morning, Jim was in one of his moods. It was much too early for him to be back. I opened the door, and the man just stood there with a slow smile on his face. Then he made a common enough request. Could I spare him something to eat, or perhaps a drink? I asked him to wait a moment and went back into the kitchen. He pointed it and came towards me and said that I'd been phoning the police and that there was no use denying it because he'd heard me. I told him that he was mistaken, that there was no phone, that I couldn't have been phoning anybody. But he just stood there, pointing the gun and looking around him as though he expected someone to jump out at him at any moment. He saw the radio set, and he asked me to switch it on.
One of the compensations of having to go into town every week is being able to call at the local and knock one over with Joe. He's the barman there. I found him listening to the radio. Well, they had some jazzy piece of music on, I remember. You know, the sort of thing that sets your fingers tapping. Suddenly, the music stopped, and the announcer came on with what he said was a police message, that a homicidal maniac had escaped from the police, and that all people in the Maintown district were asked to keep a sharp lookout for him. Maintown district is this district. Then he said that when last seen, he was heading for the rough country around Cassidy's Hill. Joe looked up at me, but I was already on my way out the door. We live at Cassidy's Hill.
There was a knock on the door. It was little Sally Johnson. The Johnsons are our nearest neighbours, about half a mile away. Her mother had sent Sally over for some milk. Whilst I was alone, away from him. If only there was some means, a pencil and paper, a note for help around the handle of the billy. He'd never notice it. Together we watched Sally disappear around the track, and I wondered how quickly she would get home. What her mother would do when she read the note. And how long help would be coming. was frightened, perhaps even as much as I was. And Sally's call for the milk hadn't improved matters. Suddenly he switched the radio off and pushed me at revolver point out of the house, muttering something about no more visitors. I knew, of course, that he was quite mad, and I tried to humor his erratic demands without showing too much that I was almost petrified with fear. I wondered when the police would come, and if they would come at all. I wasn't to know that at that very moment, two of them were only about a mile away, at the foot of Cassidy's Hill. It was a nightmare walk up the track that I'd walked so often. He was on edge, jumping at the slightest noise. Then he found what he was looking for, a perfect place for an ambush. Between the fork of the big gum tree, he could look down on the track back to the house. I had only one consolation. He didn't know about Jimmy, who mercifully had slept through it all, and who was still asleep back in the house. I would have been even more crazy with fear had I known that when Jimmy couldn't find me about the house or in the yard, he'd set out along the same track that we had walked along. Jimmy was still lying there when I reached him, but he wasn't hurt, only terribly frightened. And then, as I realized it was all over, I suddenly thought of Jim, probably home by now, calmly waiting for us.